Thanks for tuning into this presentation. You're about to either watch a video or listen to audio recorded at the Grassroots Radio Conference in 2012 at the Independent Media Center in Urbana-Champaign. Please enjoy.
So welcome. This is the Community Broadband panel. We're going to talk today about new models for making sure communities get access and can control their communications. Welcome to the Grassroots Radio Conference 2012. My name's Brandon Bowersox-Johnson. I'm a city council member here in Champaign. We're going to do some quick introductions on the panel, and then the way this is going to work is we're going to give each panelist about 10 minutes to really tell some amazing different stories about how different communities are piecing together coalitions to solve community broadband on the local level and engage communities. And then after we hear from everybody on the panel, we're going to take your questions and make this a dialogue and really talk about the community broadband questions you have and in your community, how to put together all the puzzle pieces and help you really reclaim your communications and your broadband at the local level. Then at 3 o'clock, there's a bus tour of the public broadband system here in Champaign-Urbana. Tomorrow afternoon at 4:45, there's a session about community wireless and a ton more good stuff here at the conference. So welcome, thanks for coming. Let's quickly have each of the panelists introduce yourselves, tell us where you're from, and briefly what you do. And then we'll come back and do the whole 10-minute thing in a minute, but just to give us a sense of where you're each from, what organization, and what you're up to.
My name's Chris Rizzo, and I work on campus. I'm a librarian and web developer there, but in my other role, I'm a board member here at the IMC, and I manage and oversee our technology infrastructure, and we're really excited for broadband to be here.
Great.
And my name is John Gant, and I'm a professor at the University of Illinois at the Graduate School of Library and Information Science. But the other role is I'm one of the directors for the UC2B broadband project that we've got here. It's one of the federally funded BTOP broadband projects, and so I'm one of the directors about that, and I'll talk a bit more about that as well too.
Hi everyone, my name is Milena Velas, and I'm here from Philadelphia. I work with a community organization called Media Mobilizing Project. We're a group dedicated to building infrastructure for media and communications for a movement to end poverty. So we work with community organizations in Philly, across PA, and also nationally to help them be able to tell their own stories. And we're also part of one of the BTOP federally funded projects in Philly. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about that work that we've done there too.
Great, well thanks. It's really wonderful to have you all here and hear some of these stories. Briefly, here's how this is going to happen. I'm going to kind of set the stage of sort of the broadband landscape. Then we're going to hear from this amazing panel about some of their success stories and new models. We're going to take questions and answers, then have a break, and then at 3 o'clock the bus tour thing happens. So briefly, the broadband landscape. A couple quick shout-out questions. The audience can kind of raise your hand. Raise your hand if you have 2 choices for broadband at your house, like a cable and a phone company. 2 choices. Okay, is there anybody here who has 3 choices? No, nobody at all. Okay, anybody who has only 1 choice?
I used to last year.
Okay, used to. Yeah, totally. Okay, so you are not alone. Most of America has this problem that there are very few choices. Most Americans have 2, a cable company and a phone company. And that's it. They're both monopolies, and you choose one or the other, or you take it or leave it. Raise your hand if you would rather have faster broadband and pay less for it. Okay, that's easy enough.
Just raise a roller coaster, yeah.
Exactly. What about raise your hand if you know your current broadband plan is tiered or has data caps or limits or some kind of like censorship or rating of speed. Okay, yeah. Yeah, okay. And some companies don't even tell you. They're not even...
No, they have to put caps on.
Well, right. Well, Comcast said they didn't, but then they really do kind of thing on, with their caps and their limits. And, raise your hand if you've ever had a video call interrupted and just turned into spinning dots, or you're watching Netflix or a movie and it just gets totally stuck and broken. Yeah, okay. So here in America, we're not quite in the fast lane at all. You might know that a lot of other countries in the world are getting more broadband, they're paying less. Often it's through national programs so that the quality is regulated, the the terms of engagement are more regulated and not just monopoly driven like they are here in the United States. This is a great study that just came out last week from the New America Foundation, where they really looked at leading countries in the world, how much people are paying and what they're getting for it. And here's just a few quotes about how US consumers in major cities tend to pay higher prices for slower speeds compared to customers abroad, right? That totally makes sense. And they give an example of, in Paris, you can purchase a 100 megabit per second bundle with TV, phone, and internet for our equivalent of $35, right? I wish I could get 100 megabits here with all that for 35 bucks, but no. I pay 150 and don't even get a fraction of that.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, totally. It's completely insane. The US invented the internet here in this town. We invented the graphical web browser right down the street at a place called the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. But the US has been left behind because of different models, because we don't have open access, we don't have community involvement, we just don't have the same framework as other countries. So the other important piece of the broadband landscape to keep in mind today is how we're ending up with a cable monopoly that is looming. As more and more Americans switch over to cable modems, they're actually abandoning DSL, and it's really turning into the case that in most communities, even if you sort of have two choices, DSL, because of the technology, can't keep up and compete speed-wise, and cable modems really are your only choice for true broadband speeds in most places in this country. And even in the wireless world, we're ending up with just a duopoly where the two major carriers who have most of the spectrum are really the big choices for the kind of 4G and fastest wireless things for our smartphones. And even though the merger was fended off with AT&T, our choices are decreasing. Yeah, really quickly?
You get faster down on the cable, faster out on the DSL.
Yeah, and neither is perfect, exactly.
Yeah.
The other important thing happening at the national level is this fight for net neutrality. And this is a picture of Free Press's website. If you've been to savetheinternet.com, it's a great site where they're organizing a bunch of different pieces of the internet freedom, net neutrality, stop SOPA, PIPA kind of policy effort to try to make change at the national level. But we have not won on net neutrality. It's really an undecided fight, and hopefully we can protect the internet and keep it free and open. You all probably know there have been some great successes, right? The Wikipedia blackout that we all heard about, and the way that the internet and Silicon Valley shut down the web and got people's attention finally made the folks in Washington hear us, and we were able to fend off the SOPA and PIPA legislation for now. But but it's not over. You probably also heard about the success with the Local Community Radio Act, that Prometheus Radio and other people involved in this event were part of passing an act to create more low-power FM radio station licenses through a really creative hula hooping in front of the lobbyist event that they had in Washington, D.C., which was one creative part of a huge campaign to finally get lawmakers' attention and get the secret holds lifted and get this bill passed to open up the airwaves to local community radio stations around the country. But the fight is not always going our way. This is a map of states that have barriers to community broadband. There are now 20 states that have some degree of preemption or block on municipalities at the local level trying to create community broadband projects and for communities banding together and solving their problems. So on the map, all the red states have complete bans, and the shaded states have some level of ban or hurdle that community broadband has to face.
Can you say maybe just briefly what would happen in a various orange state?
So various means just different strange laws. Like some laws are you have to go to a public referendum, but then the huge telecom providers will spend $1 million on marketing to try to win the vote their way to shut down the community broadband project. There's great work on this if you go to this website, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and a guy named Chris Mitchell who covers these issues incredibly well. This is a map of, despite all those preemptions and barriers that are being thrown up, a map of publicly owned community broadband networks, and they really are scattered. There's amazing networks, some on cable, some on fiber, popping up all over the country, and we'll talk about some of those examples and projects here today. Another important piece of this is open access. Raise your hand if you've heard of open access or know what it means. Okay, most people. So open access at the very basic level means instead of the one telecom provider owning the wire to your house, and they're the only one you can choose from to get your internet. Instead, there's some kind of public ownership or control over one infrastructure provider that makes the lines available to any internet service provider to actually sell you service. So this picture here is one model from an organization in Utopia, which is a group of municipalities in Utah that came together to build an open access infrastructure where residents get all these choices of providers and say, well, I want to sign up for this one, or nope, they treated me bad, I want to sign up for this other one, because the lines themselves are really owned and governed by a public entity and by a provider that makes them open to all the other providers to compete for your service on. And part of that community ownership and community government, this is a group of folks here in the Broadband Project UC2B in Champaign-Urbana that you'll hear more about. Part of that means that at the local level, right, we can set the rules for net neutrality, we can set the rules for open access, we can set the rules about customer service being good, and that we really get some local control over our media and our broadband. So we're here today to talk about these new models where communities can control communications and ensure access. And I want to hope that this panel, as we hear from each of our panelists, that this panel really is a call to community leaders, to you leaders in your communities, to start this conversation, to really form new collaborations. You'll hear today about a lot of amazing connections that different kinds of organizations have made at the grassroots and local level, and that we also fight for change and fight for networks at the local level, and then work together to fight in Washington as well for the kind of policies that will make sense and let us do this. And I hope today's panel is also a call out to the telecom providers, that they really open a dialogue with you, the communities, and that they be open to new models, and that they give Americans that kind of gigabit open connectivity at an affordable price that Americans want and that people in other countries have, that they do that now or risk being left behind. And finally, for citizens, I hope our panelists today really give a call out to how citizens can start the conversation by forming coalitions with schools, libraries, the media, the indie media centers, the artists, the grassroots, and that we realize that internet really matters as all of this converges, as radio goes online, or as the job application for a minimum wage job goes online, or the food stamp application, or the Social Security documentation all goes online, or my doctors go online, for us to all realize that internet and broadband and media are converging and are incredibly important for all of our communities, and that we stand up and really try to take ownership over it. So to our panel, I hope you will give us sort of a playbook of how to do this today as we hear some of the amazing stories and the models from your communities. And the start of our panel will be at the far end of the table here, Milena Velis again from the Media Mobilizing Project in Philly, who's going to tell us some amazing stories about the things they're doing there. I'm going to briefly pull up Milena's slides here. Please give Milena a quick round of applause and welcome today.
Do you want me to sit over there, or do you want to just do the slides?
It's up to you. Do you want to switch? And
That might be easier,
okay,
yeah.
great.
Try not to mess with that. Hi, everyone.
Nice job. Good setup.
All right, so I'm excited I get to go first because I feel like we have a lot in common between what's going on here in Champaign-Urbana and what's going on in Philly, and some things that are also different. And it's going to be interesting to see kind of the different models of how we're building this kind of broadband work. And like Brennan was saying, building our own control over our media infrastructure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the organization I work with, the Media Mobilizing Project, based in Philadelphia, what we do, and also our recent experience over the last 2 or 3 years, expanding broadband access in Philadelphia in partnership with lots of different organizations from the city to the libraries to other community groups through this opportunity from federal funding that came through a few years back. So the Media Mobilizing Project, we're a pretty small grassroots organization. We've been around for about 5 or 6 years, and we're dedicated to building a media and communications infrastructure for a movement to end poverty. So what that means is basically that we see that as people are organizing and in struggle across all the things that are going on now with this economic crisis, right, and have been going on for a long time, we need ways to be able to build bridges across issues and that having our control of our own media is a key element to that, right? So media and communications for us, that means everything from having a way to broadcast our own radio or our own television, to also having ways to produce our own stories, tell our own stories. And it requires kind of being able to work in some ways across all of these aspects and build out what we need, from working with people to train them in the skills they need to be able to represent their own stories, to what does it look like to have actual infrastructure that to be able to share those, right? And that can be across internet, radio, television. I think all these things, like we're saying, converge, and in some ways you have to figure out which one is the most possible at different moments. So we say that movements begin with the telling of untold stories. That's our tagline, and that's what we try to do. But I'm not going to talk a lot about MMP as an organization. I'm going to talk more about our experience over the last few years and how we got into this broadband work. So basically the way that we ended up in this work was, a few years back we were engaged in this large-scale training program called Our City, Our Voices, which was working with folks from immigrant organizations, unions, and other community groups in the city to do trainings in digital video production and storytelling, with the idea of being able to build like a multimedia network that would connect community groups across the city. And part of that at that time was also the expectation that a project called Wireless Philadelphia would be providing low-cost connectivity across the city. And unfortunately, for a variety of reasons that I won't get into, Wireless Philadelphia did not actually succeed in doing that. But one lesson we took from that was that the reason that it didn't was because there wasn't community control and community input from the beginning to really make it something that made sense for what people needed, everything from the technical side to the actual human engagement side of the project. So that was sort of like a lesson, and also just seeing the limitations of, we can train people to do this stuff, but if we don't have infrastructure for really connecting people, there's a limit to how far that can go, right? So when we saw this opportunity for federal broadband funding, which was part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, part of the stimulus funds, we really saw this as a chance to kind of answer some of these questions that we had faced. But we also knew that we were a pretty small group and kind of too small fish to do it on our own. So we actually led building a coalition, pushing the City of Philadelphia, the Department of Technology in the city, as well as other groups, large nonprofits, working around housing, around AIDS issues, the Free Library, rec centers, and brought together a partnership of community groups to secure funding and to also to be able to create this project that has brought a huge amount of new computer centers and training and connection across the city. So I just want to kind of underscore the importance of this being led by community organizations, right? And I think that's something that is shared from here in Champaign, Urbana, and also from our work in Philly. This is just a quote from one of the officials at the Department of Technology about the work that MMP had done to kind of hold them accountable to really providing the kind of connection that we really need. So I think we can really lead. We can really lead in these situations. So this is just to show you sort of some of the partners, different organizations that are involved, and to get a sense of the scale of the project across the city. So this is all of the different organizations, right? We're opening 77 public computer centers. I think about 70 of those are open as of now across the city, and with $12 million for training programs that's working with thousands of people every year. So this is just kind of some images of how extensively across the city, pretty much in any neighborhood, you can now find a computer center that's public and open and free, that's made possible by this project. So this is kind of another sense of the scale. We have them in rec centers across the city also, so places where people already gather, stuff like that. So that's sort of the large-scale picture, and Media Mobilizing Project is a kind of one of the smaller organizations in this project. We're running 6 computer centers across the city, and we're focusing on partnering with community organizations that are organizing in their neighborhoods, and also on teaching communication skills. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks like, and kind of, I think, try to draw some connections between what it means to like build this kind of broadband infrastructure, and also be able to build kind of media infrastructure, right? And things that I think are pretty similar to building community radio stations that we do. So a lot of our work has always been kind of connecting the skills to really tell your own stories to the issues at hand, right? So teaching computer classes, media classes. We work with, this is actually a class with SEIU shop stewards a few years back. And part of that is also building this kind of connection where this is a student in a class who's learning how to use a web browser, and he's actually watching a newscast produced by our television program, MMP-TV. So this is something else that, we have media programs that we've built out as a way to be able to like have a venue to tell our own stories, and to be able to build that kind of storytelling and connection. That's just kind of one example of sort of how this all meshes together, I think. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our computer centers and what that looks like, and then get into a little bit about radio work that we've done and how that connects with the internet stuff. I have 10 minutes, right? Okay. So the first thing, and I think this is something that probably if you guys have worked in community radio or any kind of computer center, this is pretty clear, But for us, like computer centers, you might think, you're at a computer by yourself, you're kind of isolated. It's the way to not talk to people, but actually we've found that the strongest computer centers have been the strongest community centers, right? The places where there's actually using the computer, learning how to use a computer, using it for things you need to do are integrated into your actual community, where you go to connect with people in your neighborhood, where you go to find out about services, where do you go to organize, all of that. So it's actually been really instructive for us to see how much a computer center can actually build that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about one example, which is Casa Monarca, which is a community organization working with like a pretty new immigrant population in one neighborhood in the city, mostly Mexican immigrant, and a computer center that we've run with them, kind of what's been possible through that partnership. So they're, as you can see, pretty small. This is like the entire office that they have. So every few days they kind of pull all the tables out, set up laptops, and have classes, and have an open computer center. They also do lots of children's programming, arts, culture, stuff like that. This is a picture of their board. Just some classes. A lot of people who come to these classes have never used a computer before, but we've also had a lot of people who keep coming back who have actually started buying their own computers for the first time, and actually really, taking this stuff into their day-to-day lives. One thing that folks did was learning how to use Skype and to be able to communicate with folks back home, which is something that, there's some families that I got to speak to family members for the first time in years and years face-to-face, right? So that's folks learning how to do that. This is the board learning how to use Excel, which I just like this photo because they look so happy about learning how to use Excel. They were actually incredibly excited about how to make a spreadsheet work and not have to, enter everything in manually over and over.
Oh,
but it's just to give you some images, right?
That's good.
So what we do there, right, is working with with the community there, folks that are coming in for programming for their children. They can come in and get computer training as well. But another thing that we do as a group dedicated to community organizing is trying to, bring together the different groups that we're in contact with, because we're doing all this work across different organizations, different issues, in different neighborhoods. So one example of that is this training that we run about 2 times a year, called the Media Institute. And we try to bring people together across the different communities that we work with to do basic training and kind of how to produce a short video about an issue in your community, something that is either like a violation of human rights that's going on, of people's basic human rights, or how folks are organizing to address that situation. and really focusing on creating a space where people can meet folks that they wouldn't otherwise, and build that kind of communications infrastructure, I would say, how to have a way to communicate across issues and find what we have in common. So these are just some pictures from the kind of last day, folks watching the videos produced. So kind of give you some faces. We actually did this one bilingually, so there was different groups that would break out, a few in English and one group in Spanish. So there's you might see some familiar faces in here actually. I think Jeff Rosette, who's here from Prometheus, is up there. And this is the Spanish language group. So this has been also a chance to work really in depth with people and meet new people through community organizations, but also kind of not just do like a one class and then say bye, but also figure out ways to deepen those skills and to deepen that kind of commitment to organizing and to taking leadership in your community. So one thing that's been possible through this process is also building a team that does radio. And this is a Spanish language radio program that we've been working on for the last 6 months. It's pretty new. We're still kind of learning how to do it. But folks that have come in, learned basic computer skills through our computer centers now are engaged in a weekly radio program that does news, music, and this is a first time folks are learning how to use recorders at Casa Monarca. These are other folks in another training at our office that are a bunch of folks that came in through other organizing that we've done around driver's license issues in the city, learning how to edit. So this has been like the last few months of work to kind of integrate this all kind of back together. There's some shots of folks in the field. And it's really, I could talk more at length about what this experience has been like for people, but I think there's probably a lot of people here who have seen this too, how much giving someone a venue through which they can actually start to share stories that are important to their community is such a leadership development situation, right? And for us, that's something that we really try to focus on, is developing real leaders that can build a movement together. And because when you're here in this situation and you're trying to figure out what to put on the air, you've got to figure out what's important to the people around me. What do I need to be reporting on, and all of these things. And it's been something really powerful to see that happen and the people develop in that way. There's some shots of us in our studio. So we broadcast out of a really small community station in West Philadelphia, just a few watts, and also online. We're trying to figure out ways also to get this out more. But just to give you a sense of this. So just, I guess, to tie it all together, right? We're also broadcast online, some podcasts. But to tie it all together, I think it's the Broadband project, and what's been possible with that, I think, has been a scale of reaching new people that through our training programs and through our computer centers, and kind of really, really integrating with communities where they're at. That's made possible, like, really, just a lot of connection across different communities, and a lot of growth. And I think it's something where there's going to be a lot of more exciting stuff happening in the next few years too. So this is sort of the first stage, I think.
Very cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Do you want
Cool.
to?
Next, we're going to go down the line and let Chris Rizzo tell us some about what's happening here at the Independent Media Center, and about all the ways that with Makerspace and WRFU and the Computer Help Support Desk and other projects that the IMC right here is engaging people in a lot of similar kind of collaborations.
Thanks, Brandon.
So if you switch, yep,
There we go.
perfect.
Great. Well, it's excellent to be here and to be representing the IMC as one of the community anchors of the Broadband UC2B project here in Urbana. The IMC is a community anchor, so we're really excited about the possibilities and the opportunities that fast internet is going to give for us. And I'm going to talk about sort of how that fits within the context of our programs and services, because really, it's another pipe. It's a bigger fat pipe, and for me as the technology support person for the center here, if we think that just getting that access is going to help us achieve our goals on its own, we're only going to repeat the mistakes of the past in terms of addressing digital inequality, addressing media and digital justice. So last night at the Magnet Mixer, there was a conversation about what is media justice, and there was some discussion about what the Independent Media Center kind of is in this community. And so I wanted to really start out with the people and the things that we do. Much like some of the programming that MMP is doing, we have a history of supporting social, artistic, activist efforts in the community and throughout the world through the indie media movement. And different technologies, at least in this context, are the tool set that we're using. So providing listservs to community activist groups, providing community-based web hosting at low cost or free cost to folks who are doing anti-war work and things of that nature. Those are a couple of examples. And so last night we were talking about media justice. And so in the context of UC2B and the opportunities that it can bring, it for me means that the people have the means to create and distribute and remix and share their media and their stories and address the causes of injustice, of things, those root causes, and also just getting their voices out there. And so Aaron Ammons at last night's panel talked about CUCPJ, the Champaign Citizens for Peace and Justice, and sort of the different campaigns that they've used and to address injustice in the police system, in the prison system, and otherwise. And technology is one way for us to do that. It can be a really great way, but it's not the only tool. And I always like to balance that. We have a long-standing newspaper, community newspaper for 10 years in this community that it gets laid out on a computer, but you know what? You can download it in PDF, I think, from their website. But it's in the context of online media and creating audio and digital video and uploading and downloading it. It's still just as effective as an organizing and activism tool. And that kind of story, I think, is important to realize, that only giving access, only getting this fast access doesn't change digital inequality. It really is only us and what we do with that, with one another, and sharing the skills that we have that really will change that. So we just got some pictures here of some technology things and some, non-technology things that have happened in the center recently here at IMC, from microcontroller electronics to poster printing, soldering. So a wide variety of things that we need to know about today. And it's exciting also to think about the opportunities that broadband will bring to us. So in that context, I want to talk briefly about sort of what are the opportunities that UC2B will bring to our center. We kind of have a mix of a center that supports a lot of different groups, from the radio station to different programs throughout the community. And we currently are on Comcast. We have a business class connection to the internet. And supporting that technology and its use throughout the building supporting the building itself. This is a wonderful space, and the board has really had to make important choices about how do we continue to do that in a sustainable way. And so when we look at our technology choices, how will we build those out in a sustainable way? So we're really excited about it being a fast, stable, scalable connection that supports and extends our programs and helps us connect to other programs. One of the biggest growing areas of our working groups here at the IMC is to partner with other organizations, not to have to own the fact that we want to do all of our programming here. You know, we're more than happy to participate with, for instance, the Center for Digital Inclusion where John is at on campus. You know, if we can provide a training expertise on a grant, we're more than happy to do that. And so, and vice versa. So we're really starting to explore those partnerships in the community because there's so many opportunities to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to do that. But we can use technology to support that interaction with groups at the university, groups at the Boys and Girls Club, at the library. And we already do in-person programming with these groups, but having this digital technology will help support doing programs here, doing programs there, doing them at both sites concurrently via telepresence. Other opportunities that we need to explore: streaming our radio station, streaming our live events. We also have a long history of community-owned web hosting support here and other online services. And so the UC2B will provide us that stable bandwidth to be able to increase the possibilities for our center to provide web hosting and other sort of online services available to the local community. And we're one of, I think, the only, one of the few, if any, community anchors that are ready to do that, and we'll likely pursue that within the first year of having this connection. The last on this list is the sort of idea that you touched on in the terms of the Philly Wi-Fi network. Past technologists here and board members have since moved on to Washington, D.C. and are still continuing to work on Wi-Fi mesh technologies. And we retain, our tech collective supports their center by being a secondary server hub for those efforts. And so we work and continue to stay in contact with them and hope to potentially build out a mesh, at least to share our bandwidth wirelessly with the downtown region. And in the future, there's ideas about building a cooperative that utilizes Wi-Fi mesh technology to provide that bandwidth, to provide service. These are in one sense, that kind of idea is a little bit of a pipe dream. Perhaps it'll be realized, perhaps it won't. But I wanted to give a sense of some of the possibilities that we'll explore using this large-scale connection. So some more opportunities. Having a faster connection will give us some opportunities to increase our tech services and support. Brandon mentioned that we run a community help desk that's currently available a couple of hours a week, but we would love to be able to expand that. And we're working on utilizing the speed of our connection to promote the overall marketability of our center. We do lease spaces to outside partners who want to rent this venue. And for instance, this conference is a great example of what we'd like to do in the future with that big broadband. A branded Wi-Fi network for your conference or small scale event. Tenants who rent the space will be able to share that bandwidth, and that'll be a marketability thing. That's part of how we pay the bills here. We have people who rent artist suites and other, a lawyer who rents a suite on one side of the building. And so being able to provide these digital services that businesses and people expect is going to really help us increase the sustainability of our center. And my goal is to really utilize that revenue stream to support an on-site paid position to manage technology that both manages technical ends of things, but also coordinates programming. And the reason for that is that, it depends on where you're at. For a long time, tech support here had been subsidized by past supportive tenants who helped build the network out, grant-funded positions, volunteers, and that comes and goes, and it can really decrease the stability of the ability to do our job, or to do the job of and achieve our mission. There's a sense in collective, horizontally structured organizations like the IMC that things ought to be free and available, but that really doesn't account for the time of volunteers, and so we're really trying to move to a more of a subsidized, individually shared services model that can help us grow. And UC2B is definitely going to help us with that. Just to give a sense of the support and the scale, finally, participation in a volunteer-run organization, it's difficult to manage, especially when you have a 30,000 square foot building and you need Wi-Fi everywhere and you need fast internet everywhere. It's not a shoestring budget anymore. We are grassroots, and we like to stay close to that original place that we came from. But as we scale up, it means that we have to pay staff, and we have to find ways to do that. Otherwise, things kind of fall apart. So we're really excited that the broadband connection really is going to help us achieve that.
Great. Thanks very much, Chris. And last, let's switch to John Gant here. Yeah, I think we're okay. I think we're doing good. And John's gonna, musical chairs. John's gonna tell us a bit here about UC2B, and again, his part of this project has been hiring a whole team of what we call community ambassadors who've been going door to door and talking to residents about getting the fiber optic broadband into their homes. UC2B is kind of unique among some of the other BTOP projects because we actually get to do fiber to the home and directly plug in homes in eligible underserved areas. So, so it's been amazing to be part of, and I think, John, your slides worked out, so you'll be able to. Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Well, great. Thanks. And it's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm usually used to standing because I'm always in front of students, but
it's up to you. You consider.
Yeah.
We won't be offended either way.
I could do the Phil Donahue thing: work the room, walk around, that kind of thing. No, it's a real pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the earlier presentations. They, to me, are very inspiring, because they really are focused on getting down to meeting the very particular needs that we have within our community of trying to address the information needs that we have, right? Because you think about it, the way I think about this is that whenever there is a particular issue or problem, whether you think of big examples like we know, like Hurricane Katrina, the tsunami in Japan, or even small local issues, like the unfortunate death here that's memorialized on the wall. Those are always instances where we have an intense need for information. If we lose our job, we have a problem with housing. we've got our kids, and we've got to figure out what do we do with them for daycare, right? So my 2 kids are here, so my solution was get in the car, you're going to a conference, right? So I minimized my information needs. And then any questions they had, I said, I can't answer it, get in the car, we're going, right? So that's how I manage my information needs on kid issues. But we do have these needs. And then more importantly, and what I really like about these examples is that we also in our communities have very important needs, but are we doing enough to really address these kinds of questions? And I've been looking at this thing for a long time, from even going back to undergrad when, in school, I had this urban planning class. I went to school in Michigan, we were over in Detroit, and we were with a lady who was on the front line of civil rights issues in Detroit, looking at all of the students and saying to us, what are you going to do to really help your community? And I was really, at that time just starting to get into computers, and I'm thinking, how can computers help address these particular issues? This was, the mid-'80s. And, as I've been learning and seeing and thinking about this and writing about it and researching it, it's such an important thing. And it's not so much about the technology, but it's a combination, as both of our speakers talked about, of the technology and the people and the process and our community all working together. And all those pieces really need to fit, because we do have serious issues around accountability and transparency and openness in our broader community. And then we have also our own personal human development needs as well too. But we always run into this problem where there's this mismatch of what we want to be able to do and our ability to be able to do it. And I love this song by Adele. And it happened to be last summer riding with the kids in the car, and they got their station. And they won't let me turn off of it. And I heard this Adele song probably about 15 times on a trip from Washington, D.C. back to here. So by the time I arrived, this song was burning in my head, and the next day I had to do a talk. And I started thinking, you know what, she's really talking about the problems in our community, right? Because this song is really, it's about a scorned lover, right? So you think about technology in the same sort of way, right? We hear all the great hype about technology, all the great hype about the broadband and so forth, right? You wake up on a Friday morning, you look at your email box, and it's exploded because some writer in the local newspaper has characterizing our broadband efforts as being misguided and so forth, and your head goes off like what happened this morning to me. Well, that's exactly what this song talks about, and that's exactly the real life that you all live as you try and implement the broadband. The other thing that's really powerful about this song is that this song was the most popular song, also on mainstream radio, but also on the internet, by the simple fact that the people who produced this song produced it in a way so that it was open for people to take it, mix it, reuse it for their own purpose, and be able to tell, not just so you can have a different version, but to truly tell your own story using this as a basis for doing that. And so I think there's a lot of lessons learned when we look in our community and we think about the different strategies we're trying to go forward, with what we want to do with broadband and with technology, and to achieve and further expand the types of initiatives like in Philadelphia or here at the IMC and so forth. But we have some serious issues. Yesterday, did you guys catch the Kansas City Google Fiber launch online? I know our UCDB team did, and their playbook looks pretty similar to ours in many different ways. But they also made this very important point about how our access to the internet is really being choked off because, and Brandon brought this point up as well, because of the price and speed and things like that. And so we've got to really think about what are the right strategies for our communities to really do this and to be able to do important things. Like my work is around open government and e-government, so to be able to address those kinds of needs. But then also the work I do around broadband adoption is how do we make that happen? And there's cool things that are happening. I love these examples that are here. We've got a project going where we're looking at libraries and rethinking libraries and as a space for youth. And not just a place for youth to go and hang out and as they, and play or geek out on all these new technologies, but also be able to understand how to use technologies to really make a difference in the lives of the communities that they live in, to really engage in terms of true democratic participation, especially when you have key institutions like the news becoming disintermediated and so forth. Or like I said, the work I do around open government and so forth, we're seeing all kinds of cool things happening where you can mash up data and you have the power to use the data and look at your world in new sorts of ways and share it and that kind of thing with all the social media. But this seductive nature of social media is a good thing, but it's also a dangerous thing too. Because we all, who did that? When I signed up for Facebook, you know, they make these technologies so simple, right? So I signed up for Facebook one night with one eye open, and I should have had both eyes open with a cup of coffee, because I didn't read the policy, the user policy, so I didn't do that. But there was this one button there that said, click yes if we can go ahead and just borrow your address book, right? So I just clicked yes, and I shut it down and went to bed. Woke up next morning, I got 600 or 700 friends. And then it sends out automatic messages, you know, that I'm connected to and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, I've made this great mistake. Or with Twitter, where we try and speak eloquently, just in 140 characters or less. Or, you know, we're thinking about cloud computing and things like that. It's all seductive, but we've got to figure out how do we leverage these kinds of things, and do we really have the right infrastructure to support being able to do this stuff. The one project we're working on is this news know-how. Where we're looking at new models of doing digital literacy and news literacy. But the constraint is that we can get kids together in a library, but then the librarians themselves don't have the skills necessarily to teach. Librarians are great, you know, with finding information. I mean, that's the name of their game. But then now we're saying libraries are spaces where people really are truly coming to learn, to be educated, and so forth. And so how do we do this? And do this with the technology layer as well too. And you know, e-government has all these promises with the web and with social media. You know, we see lots of examples like smart parking in San Francisco and so forth. But the thing that really gets me thinking that we've got a digital mismatch or a serious problem is the fact that we have this limited access. You know, the National Broadband Plan sets these goals. How do we get the 100 million folks who are not online in an affordable sort of way? And how do we really make sure that within our communities all the anchors are really set up and ready to go? You know, Chris is outlining what they want to do here at the IMC, but then at the same time, you know, the pipe is coming here. We're actually, you know, going to try and do a launch event here once the IMC is all lit up. But I wish when we do that launch event, I could also, you know, be able to bring the resources for that full-time employee, or for the revamping of the lab, or all the equipment to make sure we've got the Wi-Fi that not only serves this building, but the areas surrounding us as well too. So we've been working on it here, and I really think we've got a number of challenges, because when we think about broadband, there are those challenges. I co-authored a national study looking at broadband adoption in minority communities. So you guys know the PUNA and Internet and American Life studies. This was the same study, but with a focus on trying to understand what's happening within our communities and looking at the information by race. And it really highlights further how that divide is not only by race, but by education. We see key differences, differences by age and race, and so forth. And it gives us a clear picture of what we're dealing with within our community. So when I really like the photos in Philadelphia. You see the diversity of folks that are there. They're finding ways to really be able to reach out and so forth. Or we see differences in use as well too. And so it's very profound in trying to address and deal with these issues. So we're working on it here. And what's really interesting is that with UC2B, just so everybody knows, UC2B is the Urbana-Champaign Big Broadband Project. So that's where it comes from, UC. So around here, we always talk about UC, and then 2B, Big Broadband. So it was funded through the BTOP grants, and it's a critical infrastructure grant, and it's the only project in the country that does fiber to the home. So we've got the fiber rings, as you can see here in this map, throughout the city. And in the yellow shaded areas, another very important feature of the UC2B project is that these are areas that have been traditionally underserved by broadband, and also are areas where they are also low-income areas as well too. So the federal grant also includes money so that we can connect 2,700 households, community anchors, and businesses to the network. And so we have a team of what we call community ambassadors that are out canvassing these areas and getting folks signed up.
Are they volunteers?
Say it again?
Are they volunteers?
No, they're not. No, they're paid. It's a paid team, and we've got roughly about 15 of them, and some of them will actually be on the tour today as well too. So yeah, they're paid through the grant, and they're part of the team, and we've got a project coordinator and so forth as well. So and yeah, they'll be hopefully someone will be able to make the grant because they're actually out today as well. So this is exciting, being able to go door to door. We had a survey to try and really understand what are some of the challenges and barriers around broadband adoption for folks and so forth. So while we've got this wonderful grant, an opportunity to build out this network, when I hear the Philadelphia story, while the Philadelphia story has all the other part that we need. They've got the grant for the above ground work, for the training, for the capacity building in organizations, and so forth. And so this is, and so the Philly story, they're saying, we wish we could have the fiber, and we're saying we wish we have your training. It's like we want to marry the two together and we'd have the perfect combination. And so one of the challenges we have within our community is figuring out how do we bring together all of the above ground stuff with both cities and also with the university. And that's one of the things that we're trying to wrestle with and work out and so forth. And so a lot of what's been going on has really been on volunteer effort and things like that. And so that's one of the challenges that we face in moving forward with our project. When you look at the Google launch yesterday, they also had, of course with the Google launch, they looked at the other issue of content as well too. And so not only did they say, here's the fiber plan, but then they talked about their Google TV or Google Fiber TV or whatever they call it and so forth. But we're working on it. We're trying to figure out different solutions to it and so forth. But what's awesome is that the most fundamental thing for the network is going in the ground. We're going to see it today. We're going to actually see the fiber in the ground. That's huge. It's a future-proof technology and approach for doing it. So if technologies down the road come, we've got fiber, to the ground. To the home. The Google project isn't 100% clear if it's fiber to every single home as well, right? Chattanooga's doing a lot, but they're doing it with a mesh, with a fiber backbone, and we're actually making that fiber connection as well too. So I think it's very exciting because today we're actually going to see the fiber and see how it comes into the building and so forth, and it really makes a very large difference. So we're really working hard to try and figure out how to get all these pieces together, because I think as a community you need to have a strategy because our most important goal is thinking about what are those needs of every single person that lives in our community and the organizations that serve those people, and how do we do in a way to really meet each person's individual needs, and how do we bring together not only the technology but organizations and people who all want to help, in institutions, the schools, the churches, the organizations like here and so forth, bring those together to meet those needs. And then how do we leverage all the resources that we have from both the private sector, the public sector, not only within our area and our region, but across the world as well too, and to really meet those very particular individual needs. And every community needs a strategy and approach for doing it. Every community needs to really think about how do we protect this infrastructure so that it is open, so that there are multiple models for delivering the broadband services to folks. Here we're considering private option, co-op options, publicly owned options. It'd be nice to see some combinations of all those different things sort of work as well too. So, and I'm excited that you get to go on the tour today too, because I get kind of geeky about it, but I like actually seeing the fiber. We'd go out and talk to people about UC2B, and they're like, what are you talking about? And earlier in the wintertime, and when they were putting the fiber in the ground, they had these big orange hoses like this. I don't know if you guys have seen them. And they left really long tails on those that would stick straight up in the air. So as you would drive down the street, you'd see these orange things on the corners. And so, I'd be sitting there talking to somebody about UC2B and all this sort of stuff. And then finally one day I said, have you seen the orange tubes? Like, yeah, that's the internet. That's your internet right there, right? So we're going to see that, and we're going to see how to put the fiber into there, into it as well and it's exciting, and also the fiber connections. You guys can test it out. We were actually in a meeting where they're looking at all the different types of fiber. You know, they got some fiber you can actually make origami knots with, and it won't break, and it's pretty cool. So we're going to get a chance to see that. I'm really glad you get to see that. And then we've got different members of our UCWB team that's here, because Brandon is the chair of the UCWB board and an outstanding spokesman for UCWB. Reverend Bogan actually just walked in, who's one of the UCWB board members, and he's really helping us with an effort for bringing all the churches online and as part of UCWB as well. So we're really excited about that as well too. So we'll have some local experts to help talk about this too. So
great.
With that.
Thanks
Yep.
very much, John.
Yep.
So with the balance of our time here, we want to open it up to you all and take your questions for any of the panel or for all of us about community broadband, about some of your stories or challenges or questions or how to put these pieces together so your communities can really take control of their communication and ensure access for all. Yeah?
I'm from Omaha. Omaha has the highest rate of poverty as far as African American children. I wanted to find out how can I have access to 12 towers about 128 feet high. They're housing projects, but I got a barter deal with them through my radio station. I would like to set up or find some kind of system that we can develop hotspots so poor people can just access our Wi-Fi and get internet, because they can't afford the Cox cables because that's a monopoly, charging $40-some, $50, $70. Depends on that what plan you get. But is there some kind of system that we can build ourselves, fundraise ourselves, because I raise all the money myself, and if we can provide a service to poor individuals, then I know we can get the funds to build it ourselves. Because all you guys got is bureaucratic, so you got layers and rules and barriers and obstacles. I like to do it ourselves, so we don't have none of that stuff.
Right.
Great.
Is there any kind of technologies? I heard of Red Snapper over in Europe, kind of like a military kind of system that builds a Wi-Fi network within a city structure. Something that's low cost, maybe
Sure.
10,000, that we can buy ourselves and put it up ourselves.
Yeah, a couple
couple
answers.
responses, yeah.
So definitely there are solutions out there, and you know there are techie solutions, and there are closer to non-techie things. So there's some two great sessions actually tomorrow on community Wi-Fi. And using, leverage exactly what you're talking about, leveraging your internet connection and sharing it wirelessly through a mesh network or through a hotspot. And the difference is just basically you can have a bunch of different hotspots that talk to each other, and spread that connection out, spread that network out over like a blanket, right? You can have point-to-point connections from your big towers that sort of link up for long distances. And our friends who are here from the Open Technology Institute at New America Foundation, they're a think tank in Washington that works on internet policy and open access stuff, lots more things. But so they're developing a mesh network technology that you can set up yourself. They're still working on it, right? But that type of stuff exists now. And they're running 2 workshops tomorrow where you can learn a lot more about that. Yeah.
Yeah, they will actually teach you how to make a community mesh hotspot, and talk about how to put it up on the tower and all that.
There's one session that they're going to basically talk about at high level, like how can I sell this? What are the benefits? And then the technical session is the second one where they'll actually do a demo.
Okay, cool.
John?
Yeah, and on the bus tour today, we're actually going to see some fiber. So you got a big suitcase, maybe we can get you a little and you can take it home with you. No, but the other point I was making too, one of our PhD students from our programs here, Colin Reinsmith, and can you just talk quickly about the Philly hotspot thing at the libraries and some of the challenges trying to get people on those kind of hotspots?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I'm working with the Free Library in Philadelphia, and it's actually I'm working with a part that's not funded, but federally funded project that we heard about today, which is really fantastic. This is sort of a an opportunity to do things that, because they don't have federal funding, they're able to kind of take some other risks and do some innovative things that I think are really complementary to the rest of the projects that are going on, and a lot of them are working together. So so basically what that is, really briefly, is 4 community centers, public computing centers, and they've really, and what I've been doing is studying that as a PhD student, trying to understand some of the successes and the challenges to having broadband available, particularly in low-income communities. And one of the things that I found that was really interesting was something totally unrelated to technology that became a barrier to accessing technology. There are 4 things that are really important for people that essentially they were saying that we really need a sense of comfort before we can even engage with technology. And by that I mean safety, trust, support, and respect, so that we can feel like this is, relevant to us, this is something we even want to use and access. And so I think it's a different way of thinking about these projects that actually are really more focused on the people themselves. So it's been a fantastic project, and hopefully we can share some of those lessons even more as big broadband comes to this town. So.
Great. Other questions? Okay, yeah.
Philadelphia project. You guys just made training. You guys provided the computers. Is there any beyond? What's your vision beyond that? Are you teaching entrepreneurship or what's your vision beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I think our vision is we're kind of like a hybrid organization that does media and communications and organizing. So what that means is that a lot of the work that we do to, go out and cover a rally or a community event, right? We're not just going and covering that and then going home, but usually those are groups that we're in partnership with, and in a process of doing organizing to bring those groups in connection to other groups that we're also working with, right? Towards building a broader movement to end poverty, because we see poverty as the overarching cause of not having a good school, not having a good house, not having health care, all these things, right? So how can we connect those issues? I mean, that's our broad vision. That's a very large vision, but I think we see the media work and the communications work, everything from knowing how to send an email to being able to produce a video about your issue and message your campaign strategically and all that stuff is a really important kind of connective tissue to being able to build that kind of movement, right? Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I saw a hand back here. Go ahead, sir.
I'm Dave from Sarasota, Florida. Are you familiar with Wally Bowen's work? He's been talking about using television white space for wireless. You guys looked at any of that?
Yeah. So one of the big issues around broadband is both for wireless and wired is the spectrum issue, and so the FCC has been released some of this white space as an opportunity for doing it, and the advantage is that it works well for wireless in rough terrain, in terrain with a lot of obstacles. So dense central downtowns works well, and also out in rural areas that might have high mountains and that kind of thing as well too. So it's a good sort of medium width area network and good speed. So one of the big issues that goes hand in hand with the broadband discussion is how do we also release more spectrum? So the FCC has been very pro business in trying to release more of that spectrum to allow some innovation in that space as well too. But what's also really interesting that regardless of which spectrum technologies are out there or which part of spectrum is open, all that gets fed back into fiber as well too. And so they also go hand in hand.
Yeah, in our city we're playing, they get the government money to set up fiber for the whole traffic system, control the stoplights through the 220 area.
Right.
But within that pipe, they're laying extra fiber, so it'll be extra, there'll be, the number is lots of extra fiber in there. We're trying to, they're looking at privatizing it
Right.
in the city, but then we'll sell that as the fiber optic. And we're trying to convince them to, do some kind of community broadband.
It's a good strategy. You know, Brandon and I both participated in a conference earlier in May with anchor institutions called Shelby, Schools, Health, Library, Broadband Coalition. And one of the really important topics was how to get your community to make investment into fiber. And it was really interesting. There was a guy, the guy from Redwoods. Yeah, he's a real great guy to look up on the web. But he said, look, folks, you go say, yeah, we need it for schools and libraries, like, yeah, look at E-rate and that sort of thing. But as soon as you say the word public safety, then all of a sudden the dollars can go into fiber to put it in the ground. And public safety, actually, all they want is just a couple strands for themselves, that's only for themselves, and they don't need a lot. But it brings a lot of extra capacity that can then be used to help your schools and libraries. Dark fiber, also represents an economic development opportunity, and that you've got to consider about how to do that. But we've been wrestling with what to do about fiber and selling it and that type of thing. But I think the key, it depends on what your values are. But as Brandon mentioned and others mentioned, this open access is hugely important. So even with dark fiber sales, you got to make sure that that open access is still maintained. And there's a certain cleverness about it as well too, because the old theory of transitivity. I give it to you, but then you could give it to somebody else and change the rules. So you think about these dark fiber sales, that kind of thing could happen. So you got to really set up your rules and the policies to really protect that open access in perpetuity as well.
Yeah, that's actually really close to the question that I have. It's about longevity and sustainability. And I was curious if I could hear from each of you if long-term success and sustainability has been something y'all have been thinking about in terms of financing, in terms of maintaining these amazing projects once they're in place, and just what sort of ideas y'all have thought about.
Yeah, that's great. So around
good question.
long-term sustainability and financing, I want to hear from each of the panelists on that, because I think everyone's projects have that same issue of whether it's because we got a grant or we're a volunteer organization, there's always that issue of what happens after? What happens after the grant is over? What happens after the person who was passionate about teaching the class moves on, and how do we sustain it? So starting with Milena, how do you sustain this beyond what's happening now?
I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, I think we've talked about this one grant a lot because it's just been such a in some ways unprecedented thing that's happened, but it's also had a ton of limitations where it's we actually have to spend all this money in 2 years, and there's tons and tons of limitations politically on what you can do with it and all this stuff, right? So that's been a huge challenge, right? For us as a pretty small organization that 5 years ago we had no office and no paid staff, scaling up in this way has been in one sense both very difficult, but also made it possible for us. I think we saw it as a opportunity to take everything that had been developed before sort of in ad hoc ways, or just kind of trying it out for the first time, or just building the thing as you go, and really having the capacity to put that into place in a real systematic way, and develop it out and stuff like that. So and that is a stage to being able to sustain that, right? So that's one part of it. But I think another thing is, there's a lot of resource that goes into just getting the hardware, just getting just tons and tons of computers that we put out into the world. And those won't last forever, but they'll last for a good amount of time. And that doesn't have to happen again for a long time. And the work with people, I think, sustains, there's much more creativity that you can have with that. So we're really working with different computer centers to see how each one of those can take that up on their own too, past this project, and what that's going to look like. We also have, I'm going to actually be speaking on a panel tomorrow about our grassroots fundraising work, which is never as big as it should be, but we've been able to be really successful at both kind of pursuing these large scale funding opportunities, but also recognizing that those we can't rely on those to always be there, and we need to be able to build ways for our membership and our people who believe in our work to just be, funding it. So we have a sustainer program where people give anywhere from like $5 to $50 a month to sustain the work, and we've been able to get to about 10% of our budget through that at this point.
Cool. That's a cool idea.
Yeah.
You want me to go and yell at people to be quiet?
No.
That's okay. We'll wrap up here soon. So Chris, how to sustain this?
I think there's a lot of, sustainability goes to a lot of different aspects of, the on-the-ground work of organizations like the IMC. So can we use that? I don't know if it's,
I don't think it's on, yeah.
So we have to have, we have a core vision for our programming, and we have to have a set of volunteers and members and just basically a core group of people who continue to grow and change to execute that vision and to stay true to it and to plan for it to happen, and to raise money, to write grants. Grant funding is great. It's always limited, and sometimes the requirements of the reporting are completely onerous, and you shouldn't have. You wish you hadn't gotten it to begin with. And then there's a certain amount of organizing, getting people who just want to, use your programs, use your center, who listen to your radio station, to engage with the organization and build that Wi-Fi network, right? So you're not going to be able to do that on your own. You need people. We can have the grandest plans, but we have to decide how we're going to get those done and figure out ways to do that. And so that's fundraising, and that's staying focused and organized is really hard sometimes, especially when you've got a center like the IMC, which houses lots of different projects, and so everybody who's core volunteers ends up being kind of engaged in different things. And so one of the challenges that we have is coordinating among all those disparate groups as a unified entity to actually execute a sort of common vision.
Cool. Okay, John, you get the last word.
So yeah, sustainability is a big issue around UC2B, and it's in a different scale of things, but we're doing similar, looking at different approaches for doing it. There's a business, there's business consultants that've got different ideas about doing it, but it's a very open question about what's going to be the right way to sustain this infrastructure, and actually to use it to help build the services that need to run through this infrastructure as well. And it's a very difficult and challenging question for our community because the decision making is happening between three different major players, the city of Urbana, the city of Champaign, and as you see today, campus university actually straddles both. So you have three different players that are involved, and there's a very strongly held belief that I really endorse of public participation and governance as well too. And so we're wrestling through trying to figure out how to do this, and it's very complicated as well. But we're trying to figure out a model where it can sustain itself on its own without the external funding. We've got the external funding to get it started, but we're trying to get to that next step of figuring out what's going to be the right business model to make this work with that, given that governance structure. So stay tuned for that one. If you read the paper today, it'll give you some insight into some of the issues.
This one.
Yeah.
Okay, last question.
There's a lot of interesting information on slides. Are you going to make the presentations available like on Radio Spark?
Is that okay with everybody? Yeah, we'll make sure we get them posted and up. Thanks.
On radiospark.org.
Okay. Yeah, we can put them on radiospark.org. I haven't made an account yet, but I've been to the site. We'll figure that out. Okay, give one last round of applause to the great panel. So if you want to go on the bus tour, we'll leave from the front steps at 3 o'clock sharp. Don't miss the bus.
What's the capacity of the bus?
39 seats, 50 if you stand.
You've been watching or listening to a presentation recorded at the Grassroots Radio Conference 2012 at the Indie Media Center in Urbana-Champaign. Thanks.